I look back now on the final 2 years of the 20th century and the turning of the millennium as a time of real new beginning for us as a married couple. A time of a new way of life. We left our paid employment and our jobs in England in the summer of '98. We spent a couple of months in Portugal learning Portuguese, and then we headed out in September, October to Zimbabwe and then on to Mozambique. It was a time of new beginnings, of learning, of being like babies in a new place, learning how to communicate, learning how to live. And it was also a time of putting down roots. And particularly memorable for both of us was the season of building our own home in Mozambique. Our first visit to the town Maromeo, where we were going to live, was I think in November '98. We'd been down further south in the country in Beira learning Portuguese, and we travelled with our friend and a couple of Mozambicans overland up to Maromeo. Maromeo, the town where we were going to live, was on the banks of the Zambezi River, 300 kilometres north of Beira. It was a mud road from the city up. And that mud road on that first visit, it was dry. It took us about 12 hours, which was actually very good going at the time. But it was a surprise, 12 hours covering 300 kilometres, sitting in the back of a lorry with dozens of people. We spent 3 days, that first visit in the town. We were looking around, we were getting to know it, we were getting a feel of the lie of the land. As we talked to one of the local pastors, we realised that a Mauritian company had bought up a derelict sugar factory, sugar refinery in the town, and that the likelihood was that the town would grow quite quickly as people came back to the town looking for work. So we realised this was a good point to buy land. We started looking for land immediately, and to our amazement, in those 3 days we were able to buy a plot of land with our friend. So we bought a piece of land. It was about 50 metres by 60 metres. It was close to the airstrip, which was a field. It was in a quietish part of the town. It was slightly out of the town. The land was very fertile. There were trees on it, palm trees, some fruit trees, huge ant hills, and it was covered in bush. So we bought it. We paid 1.5 million Mozambican meticash for it, which was at the time was the equivalent to about 100 pounds, 100 euros. At that point in time, foreigners couldn't buy land in Mozambique, but we could buy property. And so we had to build a small grass shelter on the land. And then our title deeds said that we were owners of a house made of local materials with the land that came with it. Our second visit to the town was maybe 2 weeks later. This was a harder trip. It took about 17 hours to go up on the back of a lorry again. By then, we'd paid for some friends to clear the land. They'd cleared away a lot of the undergrowth and the bush, and we could see the lie of the land much better. There were trenches that crisscrossed the land. The land was on the outskirts of town, and it had been a key part of the town defence during the war, the Civil War. As we spent time on the land, we could walk in those trenches. It literally zigzagged across the land. We found bullets everywhere, old pieces of weaponry, magazines from machine guns. There was a clear sense that the land had been through the war. This was one of the things that we spent a lot of time praying into as we, in the months to come, began to build our house, was praying into this whole theme of blood that had been shed on the land, that this was had been a place of warfare and strife, and we were really praying that it would be a place of peace, a place not of warfare, but of spiritual warfare, of praying, of blessing the nations, not of strife. And so that was really our prayer, that the land would be redeemed. We then left for a while, and we travelled down to South Africa, and we started our discipleship training program there. We had a wonderful few months in South Africa. And then as our time there was coming to an end, we'd made good friends with a Kiwi couple, Grant and Emma. Grant was a fantastic guy. They'd built their own house before in New Zealand. He was a skilled builder. I wasn't. I love building, but I'd never built a house before. And so Grant had some skill and he had some time, and he offered to come up with me back to Mozambique. It's a long way from Cape Town to Mozambique. I thought it would take us 3 or 4 days. It actually took us 6 days. It took us 3 days on buses up to Harare and then down to Beira. And then from Beira, the 300 kilometres to Maromeo, it actually took us 3 days. There'd been perpetual rain, there were no vehicles on the road. We got a lift on the back of a lorry, it kept breaking down, it had punctures. We spent 2 nights sleeping in the mud on the side of the road. We survived that trip literally by playing like a Game Boy that Grant had in his rucksack. We spent hours on top of this lorry talking, playing on this game and surviving this long journey. So after 6 long, torturous days, we arrived in Maromeo. We spent 2 weeks working hard, Grant and I. We had some palm trees felled out in the forest. We brought them into town. We used 4 palm trees running down the centre of the house to hold up the main ridge, and then we had palms in the corners. The house was a basic rectangular structure. It was 10 metres by 6 metres. It was a very simple design. We were motivated with our friends that we were working with. We built both our houses on this plot of land. It was enough size for both of us. This would be the start of our YWAM team. But we were motivated by a desire to identify with the local people as much as we could. So we wanted to build our house with local materials. We didn't want to build something that was grandiose and that set us apart. So we were building with local wood, coconut palms. We were building with mud. We built with thatch. This was before there was electricity or phones in the town. We had no electricity. We had no running water. So we were building in a really basic way. We brought some materials in from the outside. We brought in window frames that we had made in Zimbabwe. We realised that we wouldn't be able to bring glass on such a terrible road without it all breaking, so we basically had no glass in our windows. We put mosquito mesh in the windows, and slowly the house took shape. We then had to leave. We'd got the house to a certain point. We'd built the basic structure, and then Grant and I left. The next visit back was actually a few months later. We were again out of the country for some time. When we were back again, Miranda and I were back. Our colleagues had already built their house, so we stayed with them in theirs. And then we had a beautiful season where Grant and Emma actually returned from Cape Town. They brought up another discipleship training school outreach team, and this team came and they spent 5 weeks with us, and it was wonderful to have a team with us building our house. Those were busy weeks, fun weeks, with a group of young people talking about Mozambique, talking about the history of the country, learning Portuguese together and spending hard days grafting, working. We had local Mozambicans working with us, and we built up the rest of the house. We panelled the walls with split coconut palm. We put stones in between the panels to make a kind of a wattle and daub type shape, and then we plastered the whole thing with mud. It took days and days, digging deep holes in the clayey mud, stomping it with our feet, pouring in water, making a mud plaster, and then plastering the walls. It was fun. We finished our house, we thatched the roof, and literally after about probably the equivalent of 8 to 10 weeks of hard work, the house was built. It cost us, at that point, less than £1,000 to build it. So we had this beautiful house. We whitewashed the walls inside. Over the course of the next year, we realised that the floor was not adequate. I brought in floor tiles from Beira and tiled the bottom of the floor. And slowly our house took shape. We were able to find a bunch of railway sleepers from a derelict railway line, and I bought 20 railway sleepers for $5 per sleeper, and each of these railway sleepers I laboriously planed by hand. They became our windowsills, they became our bed, they became our sofa, they became our doorsteps, they became an outdoor barbecue table. It was amazing, it was fun, it was redemptive. We were taking bits of things that we were finding and building it into something that was beautiful. We'd been given a small 1-foot square solar panel, and we rigged that up on the thatched roof, and that powered 2 small lights in the house. It could just about charge our laptop through the car battery that it was charging, and we moved into our house. We had candles, we had candlelight, we had no electricity, we had these 2 small lights, and it was a fun season. We sank a borehole in the garden with a hand pump, and we brought water in by bucket into the house. We built actually a really beautiful bathroom. We panelled it with coconut palms. We had a shower, which was basically a canvas sack with a shower rose on it. You could pull up on a pulley, so we could heat water in the morning, pull up our shower and stand under it in this panelled shower and have a beautiful shower. It was fun. It was trying to be creative with what we had to hand. And there was something really exhilarating about this. We had a thatched roof, and we realised quite quickly that rats had moved into the roof, that they were eating everything, and we realised when the rains came that our roof wasn't particularly waterproof. We had a lot of books. We'd made a small area in the house which was our library, our book area, our study area. Unfortunately, it was right under a part of the roof that was leaking, and so quickly I was becoming stressed because our books were getting wet. It was coming into November. We had my parents coming to visit to spend Christmas with us, and I realised that the rainy season was coming. The walls were beginning to go soft and the mud was beginning to fall off as the rain was seeping through the roof and coming down the walls. The books were getting wet. And one day I had this stressful decision where impulsively we decided we're just going to take the grass off and we're going to put zinc sheets, corrugated zinc sheets on the roof. I knew this would cost £400 or £500. It was a big investment. We'd been putting it off, hoping we would never have to do it, but impulsively we decided to do it. I bought 65 zinc sheets, and over the next 2 days ripped the grass off and started putting these zinc sheets up. I had a friend who was helping me. We were climbing up on the roof, we were taking the grass off, we were putting the sheets on. And we made, I guess, the mistake of taking most of the grass off on one side and then putting the sheets up. It was a slow business. It was hot in the sun. It was 40 degrees. We were melting up there. But I remember one afternoon, we'd been working for probably a full day at this point, and it was the afternoon of the next day. And in the distance, I could see a small cloud. I thought, that's strange. It was the first cloud I'd seen for days. And literally within the space of 45 minutes, this cloud became an enormous thunderstorm that blew up, and it came right over the house. This huge torrential storm started. Now, bear it in mind that at this point we've got half our roof off. We've got a house full of homemade furniture, books, we've got mud walls, and torrential rain started. Now I'm sitting at this point on the ridge of the house. I'm looking up at the heavens. No, God, no, why? It's not fair. And at one point I remember actually shouting at the skies, why? I spent probably an hour up on the roof trying to cover the hole. We were taking out plastic sheetings and putting them over the hole. We were trying to get grass back over the hole. And meanwhile, the rain is coming in, the wind is coming. And actually, we must have been an absolutely ludicrous sight. It was interesting how, at first I was kind of mad at God. God, this is not fair. Later, I learned that 5 people actually died in that sudden storm in our province. And it kind of put things into perspective for me. There's sometimes my neat, impulsive ideas don't come off exactly as I want. And sometimes I am hit by storms and it doesn't feel fair. And sometimes you're shaking your fist at God, God, this is not fair. But still we saw amazing kindness and amazing provision. The house slowly came together. It was a thing that we loved. It was a thing of beauty. And as I look back now on that whole season of building our house, I recognised as well my own tendency, and my tendency at times was to bury myself in the task, particularly when perhaps it was a difficult season. Perhaps I was discouraged with the language. Perhaps I was struggling to understand the worldview of the people around me. Perhaps I was feeling lonely. Perhaps I'd fallen out with my teammate. And I found in myself this tendency, which I can still see today, to bury myself in a task rather than deal with uncomfortable things. So that side of me was coming out, and I was seeing that. I was aware of that. But I was also aware that this house was such a gift. I learned through this that we can do much more than we think. We both learned that we need people to help us. Part of how God cares for us and part of how God gives grace is through people. Friends like Grant, who have the skill and the time and the generous spirit to selflessly give himself to help. Friends like our outreach team, who came and spent weeks with us helping. Friends like our Mozambicans around us. I learned as well that you can discover new ways of doing things. We were in a context where everything was new. We didn't know how to build in that context. We wanted to build with local materials, but we didn't know how. And somehow what we did was to take on board what the locals around us knew, their local expertise, and we kind of added in our part to it, our element, our creativity, our knowledge. And it created actually a synergy, something unique. And our house eventually was something unique. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful house, and people came into it and were kind of surprised and actually amazed at how beautiful a house of mud could be. I realised as well that in a way we felt like we were sacrificing something by going to Mozambique, by living as we were, by living without electricity, without running water. It felt like this was a sacrifice, and yet God blessed and enriched us in ways that we couldn't imagine. God gave us the desire, one of the desires of our heart, which was to build a home, to create something. I realised as well that there's something very generative about obedience. It feels like a mark of an obedient life is that it's generative, that it overflows to other people. And our house was able to become a blessing not only to us but to other people. Long after we left Mozambique and moved to South Africa, our house was part of the YWAM team. The first DTS was run in our living room. I taught on that DTS standing in the kitchen that I had painfully built out of coconut palm and teaching the DTS from my own kitchen. There was something created which was a blessing. We weren't necessarily seeking to do that, but kind of the overflow of living your life is that it blesses other people. I saw as well that God's timing was amazing. The way we acquired the land in those first 2 or 3 days, the way friends were able to come and help. I saw that teamwork was so bonding. I learned that being willing to learn from the people around you created relationship with them. It connected you to them. It helped them know that they were valuable because they were teaching me, that I was learning from them. It put them in a place of being a teacher. I think possibly most significantly for both of us, this season was a season of learning that it is always worth creating beauty. Living without electricity and running water, building with mud, it's very easy to think that you have to just simply create something utilitarian that is going to serve your purpose. But beauty is valuable in itself. Creating and sharing beauty is part of the meaning of being people of the kingdom. Therefore, creating and sharing beauty is a missional activity. I learnt that. It's something that has become a true Ebenezer in my life. I want to be someone who creates beauty and shares it with other people. One of the main things we know about God in the first chapters of Genesis is that he is creative, that he loves beauty. He's made us in his image, and as people in the image of God, we can create beauty and order and abundance, and we can bless the world with that.